welcome everyone to another episode of Keto Chat. I am your host, Carole Freeman, certified nutritionist, keto diet specialist. I am here today. I'm so excited. Finally, I get to talk and interview Denise Potter of Potter Dietitian. Oh wait, I gotta get the Potter Dietitian Consulting. She's somebody I've been sending referrals to for quite a while, and I'm so excited we finally get to connect, and I get to share with you her expertise. So let me give you a little background on Denise. She's a registered dietitian for 29 years. She administered the keto diet to children and adults with epilepsy and other conditions at the University of Michigan, CS Mott Children's Hospital for 11 years, and now runs her own private practice for Ketogenic Diet Therapy, KDT. She's a certified diabetes educator. She's a certified specialist in pediatrics. Oh man, this lady is credentialed, I'm telling you. And Denise received her Bachelor of Science in Dietetics from Michigan State University and completed her Dietetic Internship at the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences. She speaks and trains nationally and internationally on the administration of the Keto Diet Therapy. She is one of Charlie's Angels, a group of vetted professionals that provide keto diet therapy through the Charlie Foundation for Ketogenic Therapies. Welcome, Denise Potter.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
So glad to be here. So just to start out with, I gave it like your professional bio, but can you just give us a little sneak peek of like who you are as a person in this world?
Wow. As a person, I've been married almost 30 years to an awesome husband, Terry, and I have 4 children of various ages, 13, 16, wow, I forget because there's so many, 22 and 24, and, 4 awesome kids. And I am just so excited to be, as far as professionally, working with ketogenic diet, but on a personal level. Love my family, love to be active, run, do little baby triathlons. When they say triathlon, it means a lot of things. So little baby ones, and just stay active and always learning and growing. So.
Excellent. Well, I'm so excited you're here. I have so many questions for you. I'm really curious, like so it sounds like probably pretty much out of high school, you got on the dietitian track. Like, how did you get interested in that? How did your path start to getting all the credentials you have?
Okay, so it's kind of a stupid story, but I'll tell it anyway. When I was in college, and this happens to a lot of, high school kids, and you're in college, and everybody's asking you, what are you going to do when you go to college? What are you going to do? Because it was always a given I'd go to college, but to do what? I didn't know. And so I started telling people business just to get them off my back. And so I went to school my first year and just, took all those basic classes. And by the end of my first year, all of a sudden one day in a conversation with my mom, I said, yeah, I like nutrition. I think that'd be really interesting. And she said, oh, well, then you should go to Michigan State, because I was at Calvin College, a small private college. And she said, well, you should go to Michigan State. And I said, okay, then I will. And so then I did, and I transferred the next year, went into the dietetics program, never looked back, never had that, oh my gosh, I'm in the wrong major, type issues. And just so spent 3 years there. And then went on down to Arkansas to do my Dietetic Internship down there, which was really great. We loved it down there, and spent an extra 3 years in Arkansas because we just loved it. And then ended up coming back to Michigan from there. But I just always, I guess, I don't know, like a lot of people, nutrition was just interesting to me, kind of exciting, and had no idea where I would go with it, but started out like a lot of people typically in a small hospital. I was the only dietitian, and just, just working with any type of patients because you're the only one there. So you saw everyone, which is really great experience, and then move from there into different specialties. And I'll just keep going if you want, because so over time I transitioned toward diabetes because I realized, wow, instead of just going to see someone in the hospital today and no one really cares, and that those of you who are familiar with hospitals, the credentialing agency is Joint Commission, okay? So it's all about Joint Commission. The dietitian had to have been there, made a note, seen the patient in some way, or at least screened the patient. And I felt like sometimes no one cared I was there except Joint Commission. And so I leaned over into diabetes because I could do education, I could teach people, and I could actually make a difference in their life because I showed up today. And so I leaned into that. And then over time transitioned. Keto was just kind of an accident, how I started out with that. And like I said, if you want that whole story, I can give you that too. But anyway, just, yeah, go ahead. I'm kind of on a tangent. Sorry.
No, it's great. Yeah. I want to pause for a moment and just, most of the people listening to this are just going to be general public. Can you explain what does registered dietitian mean and what, are the steps to get there?
Oh, wow. That is a great question. Thanks for asking that, because there's a lot of confusion. So registered dietitian, so you'll see RD or RDN means registered dietitian or registered dietitian nutritionist. And those are, anybody that has that credential means they've gone through a 4-year degree program, and they usually have either done an internship in addition to that, or sometimes those clinical hours are included in the program. Like in a nursing program, you would do your clinical hours inside the nursing program. And sometimes, again, you do your bachelor's degree and then you do a separate internship, which is what I did. So there are a few different routes to get to that, but you can't even take the test to be an RD unless you have gone through the proper credentialing. Because there's a lot of difference between, there can be a difference between nutritionist and dietitian, and then there's licensing in a lot of states where they try to have, the dietitians have licensure, and then you have nutritionists. So it can be a different thing. So I think it's important when people are working with someone, it's a question you can ask, what are your, credentials? Do you want to work with someone that has that RD or RDN or specific certification for nutritionists, which is a little different. So yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. So the RD then is a national credential that has standards across all states. Mm-hmm. And then each individual state has different credentials that they may issue as well. So the RD is kind of the gold standard nutrition credential that people can get.
Right, exactly. And then, yeah, different states have licensure. For example, I'm in Michigan and we don't have a state licensure for dietitians, but it's, again, which is fine. It gets into who can practice and such. But when you go into if you're in the hospital, say, or you're in a health, a regular, many health clinics, if the dietitian comes to see you in the hospital, it's going to be a registered dietitian, because that's who is allowed by the Joint Commission to do the nutrition assessments.
Excellent. Yes. And I know my state in Washington, every state's different. All I know about is my state. And we have a separate credential. It's called a certified nutritionist, that you have to have a master's degree or higher to be able to get that. And that's the standard. That's the standard for that. So that's my credential. I'm not a registered dietitian. I don't have the national credential. I just have my local one here, which is, yes. And I'll just add right here that I am a staunch, I'm adamant that if somebody is using a therapeutic ketogenic diet for any medical condition, you need to be supervised by somebody, I would say the Charlie's Angels, but somebody who is definitely a registered dietitian. So this is somebody, and another clarification too, in my state, anyone can call themselves a nutritionist. You can say you're a nutritionist with no training whatsoever. That's another interesting thing. So I just want to try to educate people just a little bit, because it can get so confusing and people don't know who's helping them with what and what credentials they have. So nutritionist doesn't mean anything. What's protected in our state is the word certified, and the nationally registered dietitian or registered dietitian nutritionist is protected. So anyone who's calling themselves that knows what, that they can use that under only special conditions, right? Or they have to have special credentials for that. But be wary, right? So if somebody's calling themselves a nutritionist out there in the world, it doesn't necessarily mean anything. So like Denise said, ask their training, ask their credential, ask licensure, certification, what is it that they actually have? And they should provide you with that too. So
that's a really fair question, because the same in Michigan. That's why it's taken so long we can't get licensure through in the state. And I won't say, I haven't been super active with that, but because there are groups that are nutritionists, which have a whole different level of training or no training. Again, because yes, you can be a nutritionist. Anybody can hang that that banner up in Michigan and say they're a nutritionist, go out and charge any amount of money. And yeah, the general public doesn't know that. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. And of course, you have a master's degree. I fought long and hard for my education and credentials and experience. And so you do really want people to, at least know what they're getting, right? When they're out there seeking out a professional. And I'm also going to just say, yeah, thank you for the plug that we hope a registered dietitian would be the person to work with for a therapeutic ketogenic diet, because there are a lot of concerns, and the diet can be absolutely safe and not a problem. But there are many things to look for. And one of my concerns is a little bit where, a lot of people started working with ketogenic diet yesterday, last week, last month, and we all have a first day. Okay. So I get that. But you really want to think about those who've been working with it for a long time. I'll tell you, I've learned something something new every single day since I've been working with this diet. Something odd, something strange, something different comes up all the time. And the registered dietitians, we have a great network of dietitians. So if something comes up that I don't know, I've got 100 buddies that are also working keto that I can go to and say, of course, an email listserv and say, man, guys, I'm not sure what to do with this. And we all have those every single day. And this is all people that have, most of us have been doing it a long time, but then also we're bringing along the young dietitians that haven't been working with this so long. So the network's pretty good. It's pretty tight because it's small. It's a pretty niche field. But yeah, I just can't tell you how much, a little bit of experience can make a big difference with this.
Yeah. Oh, that's great to hear that you have that network of support, because you're right. Especially the categories of people that you love working with, that you're really good at working with. Those people absolutely need somebody who's clinically trained and experienced and has resources to go to when they don't know what the answer is. And I'll add to that too, that there's a lot of, people that are following a ketogenic diet because they think they want to primarily follow it for weight loss, but anyone who's on any medication at all, I'm adamant too that they need somebody who is, a credentialed healthcare provider and familiar with that, or at least has referral resources they can refer to, because there are so many different things that can, compound upon each other when somebody has any medication for any reason. Even if they're just doing keto for weight loss, there's a lot of things to watch out for. So those of you watching out there, if you're on any medications, therapeutic application of any reason for the keto diet, please reach out to your trained and experienced healthcare providers. So
yeah, and I like to, any patients that I work with, I do require, they need to let their doctor know that they're working, that they're on a ketogenic diet. And usually, of course, because I require lab work as well. And so they kind of have to ask their doctor because they need the lab work. But yeah, it gets a little scary because things happen and then people can land in the hospital and the doctor's going to say, if I had known you were on this, maybe they could have done something different. But there's a big, unfamiliarity with the doctors, because this is even within, neurology where they are administering the diet, there's still definitely a little level of, say, discomfort in a bad way, but they are really reliant on the dietitians to manage these patients. And I'm talking in critical situations in the hospital, in the intensive care unit. Honestly, the dietitians are working very closely with the physicians for the care of these patients. So it's, yeah, you can't undercut that importance.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what areas of a therapeutic application of ketogenic diet, like what conditions do you specialize in treating? Or we can't use treat for a dietitian, right? We have to say you support nutrition for.
Well, it's medical nutrition therapy.
Okay.
So, therapy, treating. I think we can get into this play on words, and if it really came down to a courtroom, what are we going to do, So I don't know. I'm treating people. So one one specialized area, I'm going to start out with where the diet, and I'm sure you've addressed this, but the diet 100 years ago became proven and known for pediatric epilepsy and adult epilepsy as well. So it's been used for 100 years for this application, and that's where I started, was pediatric epilepsy. And I've seen just absolute miracles with this. And one of my favorite things, and I've gotten this quote, I'm probably going to cry in a minute. I've heard this from parents several times where they say, I got my kid back. And they look at you and like, I got my kid back. And I want to throw names in there and I can't. But it's just, it's beautiful. And a child, and maybe that doesn't mean they're seizure free. Maybe it means they used to have 10 seizures a day. Now they have 1 seizure a day. They used to last 5 minutes. Now they last 30 seconds. You know, I mean, they're all different levels of how well, you know, the diet works, but there's a greater than 50% chance that the diet's going to work in pediatric epilepsy for these kids. And this is after they've tried 2 to 3 to 4 to 10 medications. Okay, so these kids, when they come in, and unfortunately, when they come in sometimes and are referred for the diet, sometimes they have gone through up to 10 or more medications. It's well researched that the diet, and it's in there's a new consensus statement out. If anybody wants, you know, great details, 2018 consensus statement put out. Dr. Kassoff would be one of the first authors on there. Anyway, that has recommendations for who should use the diet. And any person with epilepsy that's failed 2 medications that were appropriately prescribed is definitely a candidate for the diet. And then there are some other conditions such as GLUT1 deficiency and PDHD that you also would put a patient on the diet immediately for. You wouldn't wait until they failed 2 medications. So that's the first place, my first love and first introduction to the diet. And I'm just going to go on, you know, a slight tangent with that. So that the diet's been around for 100 years. In 1994, I'm going to talk about the Charlie Foundation briefly. Is that okay?
Yeah. How can we not talk about them?
Okay, so in 1994, a family had a little, I believe he was 2 or 3 years old, little boy Charlie, who was having just hundreds of seizures. He had brain surgery, had all kinds of issues, and on numerous medications, and nothing was helping his seizures. And so the parents are just researching, and they looked and they found it, you know, in a book, and it said ketogenic diet would be a treatment for his epilepsy. And they went to their doctor, and their doctor said, no, that's not. And I don't remember all the details of why they said no, but they said no. And they didn't take that for no for an answer. And they took him to Johns Hopkins, which was one of the few places in probably the world that was using the ketogenic diet still. It had been used in the 20s, 30s, 40s, but it kind of fallen out of favor because many new seizure meds kept coming up. And so why try a diet when seizure meds work? Well, even in spite of all the new seizure meds, 30% of the patients with epilepsy won't be helped by the meds. Okay, so no matter what you do, 3 out of 10 need something else. So Mr. Abrams and his wife, they took Charlie to Johns Hopkins, they put him on the ketogenic diet, and a week later, he's seizure-free. And he's seizure-free. They've been suffering with this for, I think, up to a year at that point. Thousands of seizures their child had, and now he's seizure-free after 1 week on a diet therapy. And so, thankfully, they were mad. They were absolutely angry, a righteous anger. They took it, they went, you can get the Dateline interview on YouTube with Jim Abrams, and then they formed the Charlie Foundation, and they created a movie with Meryl Streep, called First Do No Harm. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's have a box of tissues next, you know, if you haven't seen it yet. It tells a parallel story about a family who had a similar situation and got their child on the diet. So anyway, they wanted people to know. They said, you've got to be kidding me. This therapy is available. There are children who need to be helped and adults, and what's going on. So the Charlie Foundation, honestly, almost single-handedly just brought the diet to the forefront in the spotlight, and they started with training. And when all these things were coming out, they prepared and they had training available, and they started new centers. Okay, so they went from, you know, one center in the U.S. and again, there may have been other centers that were offering the diet, you know, in small scale. And now we have about 104 centers. I haven't counted in the last few months, but 104 centers. Now, 104 is great, but imagine how many hospitals we have in the US. Imagine how many hospitals. So there are 5 places in Michigan you can go to get the diet. I can name you 8 or 9 states that do not have a place for someone to go to put their child or adult on a ketogenic diet. 8 or 9 states in our country where that's just absolutely not available. You'd have to travel across state lines to have a professional put your child on the diet. So so I forget where I was going from there. I saw a Charlie Foundation. So anyway, so the Charlie Foundation, and they're, of course, you can find them easily if you Google them. They have a list of professionals. I'm one of them, obviously. People that are vetted, who've been working with the diet for a length of time and really have great credentials and can help patients with the diet. And it's a lot of people like me who I started out in a clinical setting and working with the diet over time. Working with that in private practice, I came to the point of, wow, I can't do both. I can't run both of these. And there's so much unmet need on the private side that it made more sense to jump over here and say, I think I can make a bigger impact over here. And I've done all I can there, and that was amazing. But I think now over here, I can hopefully expand my impact. So.
Yeah. Okay. So then, so pediatric epilepsy was your first foray into the ketogenic diet.
Thank you.
What other therapeutic applications are you in love with in your practice?
Okay, thank you. I need to be rerouted so I remember where I was. So, so adult epilepsy is the next thing. The adult epilepsy is a very huge unmet need because these people, many of them should be on the diet, should at least give the diet a try. I'm going to give you super quick numbers. In Michigan, there are 100,000 people with epilepsy. Wow. That means 30,000 of them, 30%, have uncontrolled seizures. So that means 30,000 people should at least give a try to the diet, okay? And that means half of them, a little lower odds for adults, 30 to 50% for adults, but let's say half of them have some benefit. So 15,000 people could have great benefit from the diet. And okay, let's say I'm half wrong. Okay, 7,000 people should have great benefit from the diet. But I'll tell you, the last time I counted brief numbers, 6-8 months ago in Michigan, you probably got about 500 people on the diet that are being monitored by, by dietitians in a center. So we've got, less than 1% of the population for the treatment that has class 1 clinical trials that we know it works. There's no question of whether or not this diet is effective for this condition of epilepsy. So there's that. That's a pretty big soapbox that I like to stand on because I really want that to change, and I want to change now, not 25 years from now, because the Charlie Foundation started 25 years ago, but I hope it's exponential what they can do and everybody in this arena can do in the next 3 to 5 years. And then as far as other conditions, obviously it's getting pretty, the diet's getting pretty well known for cancer treatment. And thankfully, even since 4 or 5 years ago when I started this, I feel like the acceptance level is really improving and increasing with that among physicians, because at first there's a lot of pushback from physicians, but the studies are there, the research is there to say that this is a very reasonable treatment to try in conjunction with, I encourage it in conjunction with other treatments. So I don't encourage people with cancer to use the diet as a standalone treatment. We know definitely from mouse models that the diet helps to make the chemo more effective. It helps to make the radiation more effective. It kind of opens things up to where the treatments can get to, on the cellular level where it can be more effective. So that's pretty exciting. And then it's more studied in glioblastomas, but yet I'm okay to use the diet with any type of cancer that doesn't have a contraindication, because we don't know that information yet. We just don't know. And it's going to take time and research to know exactly what cancers, maybe we're going to come out and say this exact cancer, it doesn't work. And then that's fine. But what I do know, and the reason why ethically I think I had to get out here and do this, is it's been 100 years with pediatric epilepsy, and there are just thousands and thousands of kids that aren't being treated. And knowing that makes me think, I'll be dead and gone before this diet is well accepted for cancer. And so I'm just jumping in and trying to make a difference. And then if we go from cancer and then ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, I haven't seen the diet well utilized for this. There are a few studies, some mouse models that suggest that it could be a good idea. The way that the energy is being provided, because you're talking about, with the ketogenic diet, you're providing ketone bodies to provide energy versus carbohydrate metabolism. So everything's changing, and in some of these conditions, in Parkinson's disease and ALS, perhaps in MS, and Alzheimer's, the carbohydrate metabolism's not functioning well, and diabetes, to say the least. Things aren't functioning properly, and if we change that cellular metabolism, we can make an impact on, potentially, again, the research isn't fully there for all these conditions, but it makes sense that we can make an impact with these conditions. And it's going to take years and brave people to say, yeah, I'm going to try this in a very safe way, in a safe environment, with laboratory testing, with supplementations, to see if this has an impact on my condition.
So much good stuff.
I have a couple, and I didn't put a list in front of me, but I'll name off a couple other conditions that are so exciting with the diet, ketogenic diet, because I don't think it's snake oil. I don't think it's going to fix everything. It's not. Remember vitamin E a few years ago? Oh my gosh, you could fix anything with vitamin E. Anyway, but these are things that, again, that I are researched to an extent, and I feel strongly. Migraine headaches. And I started believing this when one of the nurses I met at a keto conference, she came back and she said, 6 months later, I ran into her at the same conference in Phoenix that you and I said we were at the similar conference. And this nurse said, yeah, I haven't had a migraine since Beth cured me. And Beth's the Charlie Foundation consultant dietitian. She said, Beth cured me of my migraines. And I said, what are you talking about? And she said, well, at the conference, you can't find a carb, okay? This keto conference 2 years ago in Banff, you couldn't find a carb unless you went out looking for it. So she came out of there in a mild state of ketosis, and she got on the plane. She has a migraine every time she gets on an airplane, every time without fail, horrible migraine. And she flew home, and she didn't have a migraine. And she thought, wow, that's pretty cool. And so she continued to eat low carb, pretty strict keto, and she had one migraine over the course of a year and a half. And actually 2 years now since she did that. And now she's a little looser. She basically feels like she's cured. She can have a little flexibility with carbohydrate now. She doesn't have to be as tight. And she was having 3 to 5 migraines a week, including in every time she flew, and she flies a lot for her job. So that kind of sold me on migraines. Wow, that's awesome. I'd like to see, as a matter of fact, I spoke to a physician about this the other day. I'd like to see for status, I forget what they call migraines, status migraines, when we have so many patients in the hospital with a migraine that no one can stop. I'm thinking, why are we not making them ketotic immediately and using this even as a short-term treatment for migraines? Wow. Okay, so that's one thing. Another cool thing is bipolar disorder. I'll give, again, this is a really loose, one person impact on this, but I met somebody who had heard me talk about keto, and he called me back a few months later and he said, hey, I want to talk to you about this. And so I chatted with him. Actually, this person was a medical student, and the long story short is he already was doing ketogenic diet to an extent, or a high-level modified Atkins diet, had bipolar disorder, and nothing was working. None of his meds were really acceptably working for him. And so he has had the best results of any of his medications with this dietary change. And so I don't know if he's still on some medication. I can't give any details about that because I really truly don't know, but his doctor was very happy with his success. And what's interesting is, just from hearing me talk for 20 minutes about keto and how we administer at the hospital, et cetera, he came out of that and said, wow, this works similar to how some of these medications work. So I think I'm going to just give that a try. And boom, his life has been much improved since then.
Yeah, we have other stories, examples of that. I actually interviewed Carrie Brown. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she's, out publicly. Does ketogenic cooking. She's a chef. And so I did an interview with her where she talked about how keto was instrumental in her conquering her bipolar.
Wow, that's great. And yeah, so and then another area, and that's just starting to be well researched now, is schizophrenia. And there's a doctor, Chris Palmer out of Harvard, who's working with some patients with schizophrenia and seeing good results with that. And that's it can be a challenging population, but he's really seeing some good benefits with that. And he had a poster at the last keto conference a couple weeks ago in Korea, and is working on new research. And so that's really exciting too, that area, and just amazing. And some of these people, he has a brief case study written up. These people were on 20 to 30 medications that had failed. Yeah. And not that the meds are terrible, but wow, look what they've gone through. And, and interestingly enough, with the schizophrenia, a lot of the meds are also anti-seizure medications. So there's a lot of crossover with the brain chemistry and how those things work.
Oh, so much exciting stuff too. Any examples you can share of people you've worked with? I know you can't say specifics about people, but any case studies that you can share about remarkable recovery that you've supported?
Yeah, so a couple different things. One patient I think of real early on that I worked with a diet, and I remember the doctor saying, "Oh, we'll put him on the diet. He's always going to need medications, but I think the diet's going to help him, and so we'll get him going." And so we put this child on the diet, and I remember mom was, just absolutely over the top stressed out, and it's hard. It's hard to do when we're talking the level that we're doing, with some of these in pediatrics. And she's texting me at 10 o'clock at night, and just thinking, oh my goodness, how's this going to go? And so anyway, but again, long story short, this child within a few weeks is seizure free. We keep him on the diet for kind of typical standard 2 years. He continued to be seizure free. We wean him off the diet very gradually, which is typical of a lot of keto programs. We'll wean very slowly. We don't just pull people off the diet quickly in epilepsy. And he remained seizure free for years. I saw them, not too long ago, and here he is, still seizure free. And then it was kind of cool because they didn't even think that it would work that well for him, but we had to try it because, we didn't know. And so that was real exciting. Not everybody, only less than 10% of the patients in epilepsy will become seizure free on the diet. And I think that's important for people to know, because you don't want parents coming in with this false hope that that they're going to be seizure free. There are a few conditions that it's very more likely than others, like GLUT1 deficiency and Deuce syndrome. Those two specifically are more likely to be, promote seizure freedom. But in other cases, I've had, quite a few cancer patients that have had, with glioblastomas or with breast cancer, specifically just that I think of, that have had good long-term results. What I follow people for as long as they want. I may follow them for only 3 months. Some people extend out to 6 to 12 months. And so there's a cat. So I don't always know the long-term results unless I go back and contact them later. And so sometimes I do that, and it's always great to hear. So I have some people with glioblastomas who, well over 2 years, 3 years, so that's always great to hear, because the survival rate on a glio, I believe, if I'm, I hope I'm saying the right number, but it's 5%. The likelihood of living past 18 months is 5%. And so when you start saying people are having clean scans at 2 years, something's happening. Something's happening that's way outside the realm of normal treatment. And then as far as other, just so many cases of people, feeling better, having better cognitive abilities, having more energy, feeling less bloating, some just basic things that they're feeling better in general. And I think because our diet can be sometimes so terrible, sometimes we just slide off into so many carbs and honestly, just sometimes just flat out too many calories. And when we pull that back and we get the calories in line and we get the carbohydrates down, I think just in general that promotes such a feeling of better, well-being.
Now, let's talk about the different types of ketogenic diet. So in the side of things that I'm working with where people argue over macro percentages, we're not talking about that. Therapeutic applications of the ketogenic diet, there are different names, types, extremities you might think of that way. But so share with us the different types of ketogenic diets that you may be supporting people with.
Okay. So I'm gonna tell you, but I'm also gonna refer to, there's a really cool description of the 5 types of ketogenic diets on the Charlie Foundation page. Just if someone wants it in writing where they can look at it and really see it all. But the first type of ketogenic diet that's very strict would be considered traditional ketogenic diet, where I'm going to help someone calculate out exactly and see. People say macros, but I'm looking at a ratio of how much fat, and it's the ratio of the macros, right? So how much fat compared to how much protein plus carbohydrate. And so a very high strict ketogenic diet might be a 4-to-1 ratio. So 4 grams of fat to 1 gram of protein and carb plus carb. So 90% fat, pretty hard to do on a typical oral diet. But you'll see that a lot of the pediatric or adult formulas are calculated that 4-to-1 ratio. You virtually can't have an adult on a 4-to-1 for a long period of time unless they have a real high caloric intake, because you can't even get enough protein in for an adult on that ratio. Okay, so we're not doing that. But so typically when someone says ketogenic diet and you say it to someone like with a background like me in pediatric epilepsy, they're thinking a 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 ratio. Everything's weighed and measured very specifically. So that's one side. The next level down would be a modified ketogenic diet. And that would be still strict, still measured out. And when I'm talking about 50 grams of chicken and 180 grams of broccoli and 40 grams of butter, okay? Very strict meal, measured out. But at a lower level ratio. So at a 2-to-1 ratio or a 1-to-1 ratio when you're looking at that. And again, it's just another way to look at your macros. The ratios, macros, it's the same thing put into 2 different categories. And then we have the MCT diet, which is medium chain triglyceride oil. And that tons of people on keto now are using MCT oil. It's used routinely in the hospitals, with all the patient populations in the hospitals using that. The MCT oil helps get a higher level of ketosis, and sometimes you can get away with more carbohydrates. So on that MCT diet, it might be strictly calculated or it might be more with household measures, but same idea. We're trying to get to a certain level of macros or ratio to get the ketosis. And then the next layer down would be modified Atkins diet, which honestly, quite frankly, that's what most people are doing that are saying, okay, I'm keto. Pretty much they're doing modified Atkins diet, which is probably a 1-to-1 to 2-to-1 ratio with your macros. Again, fat to protein plus carb. And somewhere in that vicinity, probably even more so 1 to 1.5 to 1. And a lot of the recipes that you see in the recipe books, not for fat bombs as such, but just typical meals, a lot of them are hitting in that 1-to-1 level, which is a really easily attainable level. I mean, you can eat 1-to-1 and not even feel like you're missing anything, if it's well done. So, but that's not so strictly calculated, and that's more saying, hey, 8 to 10 ounces of protein a day, and try and then just eat, keep your carbs, and it depends. You'll see 10 to 20 grams of carb a day as a recommendation there, but I'll tell you that, and even in the therapeutic hospital world, that every center has a different take on what a modified Atkins diet is. So it's hard to tie it down. Hopkins, wrote the book. They wrote the ketogenic diet guideline book, basically. And so they start people out at 10 grams of carb, and that's super low. So a lot of places are doing different modifications and saying, man, if you eat 200 grams of carb a day, maybe we drop you to 100, and then we drop you to 50. And then and then we talk and we see what your level of benefit is. It depends what you're seeking with the diet. Are you seeking seizure control? Are you seeking cancer cure? Are you seeking weight loss? So how you apply these different diets and to what level and to what extent very much matters with what your goals are, because I'm not going to put someone on a real loosey-goosey diet who needs to cure cancer. Okay. I'd like them to be strict, but we'll do whatever they're able to do. But I'd like to be pretty strict because we're playing with fire here, we're playing with rattlesnakes. So I want to get serious.
Yeah.
Anyway, so modified Atkins can mean a lot of things, but I'd say that's basically what most, the typical trend, what people are doing that's considered keto now. And it's kind of hard because there are so many different definitions. As I was doing a lot of research this summer or this fall for a talk, and then I was looking through the research. You have very low carbohydrate diets and low carbohydrate diets and all these different definitions, which I don't have them right in front of me, but all variations of what's considered low carbohydrate. So it's really muddy right now, and I think you were mentioning earlier before we turned on the recording that, wow, we need to come together on a little bit of this and have some set standards on what's what, which on one hand, that's great. On the other hand, it's difficult because, at least the way I like to work with patients, every single person is dealt with as an individual.
Yeah.
And what works for you doesn't work for them. And to get someone into ketosis, I can have one person at a 2-to-1 ratio and have great ketones, and the next person have very few ketones at a 2-to-1. So what's it mean for each person? So it's hard to tie that down. But I like to measure the ketones in the blood. That's my favorite way to measure them, to really know how people are doing and to have good solid numbers and good solid evidence. So that's more important to me really than the ratios. And also, what are the outcomes? Are we seeing the benefit? Are we seeing the results? The results are more important than the numbers.
Yeah, you touched on something that's so important too, because people get so confused and conflicted. They wonder, why is there so much disagreement about, one person says this is what a keto diet is and the other person says no, this is what it is. And I always explain to them it's because you've got those keto coaches out there, right, that they lost some weight on it, they figured out what worked for them, so then they say, well, this is the way to do it. But exactly what you said, and especially in the therapeutic realm, is that it is so different for each person. And that's part of what your expertise is knowing how to modify it and change it and adjust it to get it to work for each individual.
Right. Yeah. Because some people come in and it's interesting now versus 2-3 years ago. People came to me 2-3 years ago and said, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. I can't find any information. And I'm like, cool, I've got it, And now people come and they say, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. There's so much information. It's such a 180 in such a short period of time. It's laughable. It's great, but it is a lot for people to wade through to figure out, which again goes back to really making sure you have somebody who has a little experience and who has education and training to know that there's more. And hopefully we'll have, even through, as a registered dietitian, hopefully pretty soon we'll have something through that layer to have a keto certification there within our organization. Because we don't have that yet. We have a position paper talking about the ketogenic diet, but we don't yet have a credentialing as we like with diabetes or with pediatrics. But I think that's needs to come soon, where we have that additional credentialing, because that will help people also to understand that, yes, this person has been vetted and trained.
Yeah, that will be exciting. Hopefully, if I just be a little political here too, hopefully it's actually the therapeutic keto diet, because I know with the diabetes education, and they encourage a very high carbohydrate, maybe higher than what would be optimal for somebody with diabetes for that. So anyways, I'll tuck that under the rug for now.
Well, I'm going to pull it back out.
Okay.
So let's talk about diabetes. So, I'm almost, I'm embarrassed. So if any, old patients of mine, come in and say, oh my gosh, you gave me 60 grams of carb a meal. I'm sorry. Okay. That's all I knew then. That's what we did then. It's not what I would do now. Okay. Absolutely, unequivocally no. And it's funny. And the ADA still, they don't, they aren't specifying the amount of carbs other than, oh, you need more than 130 grams is their position, or 135 grams of carbohydrate. And you don't. You can function very well on many fewer grams of carbohydrates. So, but if someone's going to start the diet for diabetes, please don't do it without your doctor and a dietitian. Please, 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 because that now you're getting into dangerous. Now you're getting into dangerous, and you talked about medications, and that's the first application I think of with meds where you really can hit a danger level. So you want someone who's physicianed, who knows what meds to reduce before you start the diet, how to monitor that, and to be very strict. But man, with diabetes, we got to get on that too. I mean, it's craziness, and it's honestly probably craziness that's taken us this long to wake up. You know, again, I apologize. But, you know, let's start here and move forward and say, let's be serious about this, and let's decrease the, you know, the medications, let's decrease the blood sugars. And if I can tell this super quick, a doctor at the conference, the Keto Symposium 2 years ago, no, it wasn't, I'm sorry, I think he was down in Tampa at the Metabolics Conference. And I don't know if you were at that one, but he had type 1 diabetes. He wanted to do a triathlon, and I mean a real triathlon, not like what I do. And, you know, then run a marathon, bike 1,000,000 miles, and swim 2 miles. Okay. Well, he is having low blood sugars 3 and 4 times a day, and devastating low blood sugars where if you have diabetes, you understand, you crash. You can even get confused. It's a real serious implication. So, and dangerous if you're driving. So he's having this 3-4 times a day, but now he wants to start training for marathons. Okay. Well, how do you do that? And so he decided to put himself on a ketogenic diet. He went down to 70 grams of carb a day, which is pretty liberal, really, for a ketogenic diet, but he was in ketosis. He cut his insulin needs down by 50%. Again, he's type 1 diabetes. So how much better just to, you know, not need as much insulin. That's great. His blood sugar is well controlled. And now at the time he spoke, he had 4 or 5 low sugars in a period of months versus 4 or 5 a day. So his quality of life, let alone, and this is with intense training, and he did do a couple of triathlons too. So with intense training, and this gentleman, he had every blood sugar, you know, from when he was 8 years old. I mean, he had everything. He was quite detailed, but it was amazing the results he had on that. And this is nothing about even his athletic performance or anything. It's about quality of life, about glucose control, and about safety. And so even because we would say, oh, with type 2, it's more important, et cetera, et cetera. But man, I would argue that with type 1, it can also be a very, you know, critical option. And again, I don't think it has to be 20 grams of carb. And I know there are some programs that's where they're saying is 20 grams where you have to go with diabetes. But oh my gosh, if you're eating 250 or 300 grams of carb and we get you down to 1 or 150, may not really call it keto, but holy cow, you're going to be in a lot better shape. You're going to live longer and live better by doing that. So sorry, you mentioned diabetes and I couldn't help it.
No, that's great. Okay. I'm glad we went there because, you know, it's interesting too, because I came out of, you know, master's degree in nutrition, and we got this simultaneous psychology degree where, you know, I was trained that restricted diets cause eating disorders and they don't work and there's no way, it's not sustainable. And so we, instead of helping people follow restricted diets, that we should just help them learn to love themselves and give up on dieting. And because it just made people feel bad if they dieted, then they were going to regain the weight and they would just feel even worse about themselves. Right. So it took me going through a horrific car accident, brain injury, chronic pain syndrome for me to have the experience so desperate that I was willing to try it, risk giving myself an eating disorder and feeling bad about myself. Right. And it's been transformative, like experiencing it and how amazing I feel and the inside out and every which way of my health and body transforming totally gave me a different perspective. And it took that for me to open my eyes to that. And I still have, so I'm the black sheep of my class and cohort at the school that I went to, because that's what I found with clinicians is that unless they've used it clinically like you have and seen the amazing transformations that people have gone through and the power of it and how it's not cruel and in fact it's actually a gift of freedom for them, or they've tried it themselves, if they haven't had either of those experiences, they're still very much on the I want to call it like the myths of a ketogenic diet about how it's dangerous and unsustainable, and you know, we shouldn't be doing that, right? And so I'm really glad that you've had the experiences you had, and you can speak out and say, like, it's not only safe, it's going to save these people's lives. And you know, for diabetes, it's not dangerous to eat less than 130 grams of carbs a day. And in fact, you're seeing these people having amazing health outcomes and quality of life.
You made me think of something. Let me see if it'll come back to me. Oh, I know what I want to just touch on really briefly, because I've struggled through this thought of when you mentioned, you know, causing eating disorder and you know, having this restrictive diet, and yes, let's just let it go, and yes, love me, and big is fine, and yeah. And we don't want to pick on anybody, but you know, we know the health outcomes of obesity. We know it's horrible. We know America continues to go up and up and up in weight. And so, but I think of it sometimes as like a budget, and I know there have been made different diet plans that look at food like a budget, but I think it's not a crazy way to look at it, because I would like to look at my finances and just say, why should I have to not spend? Why should I not be able to buy whatever I want? Why should I not have a new car? Why should I, you know, name it. Why can't I do that? No, I'm sorry. I have a budget that allows me to buy everything I basically could ever want, really, you know, within reason. You know, I have a budget. I have to follow it. If I don't follow my budget, I get in a lot of trouble. Things happen. It doesn't go well if you just ignore your budget. So I can pretend that I should be able to get through life without a budget. It shouldn't matter. But it really doesn't work that way. And so sometimes I have to look at food that way, because I would love to just eat whatever I wanted, and do whatever I want. Actually, you don't really feel good when you eat whatever you want often. So, but I would love it if it wasn't that way. I would love it if it was just easy and it didn't matter and we could just move on. But it's not that way. We need a budget. And the budget can be just like diet, but I just think to get in that mentality that it's not a dirty word to have some control. And we like in our culture not to have control, to do whatever we want, because everybody's okay. It doesn't matter what you are, who you are, blah, 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 we're all okay. And sure, that's true, but if you want good health outcomes, you might need a budget. So.
Yeah. And the, you know, the work that I'm doing, I've found that following what we call, you know, modified ketogenic diet or modified Atkins type approach, it allows people to follow that budget much easier, right? Because they're experiencing that reduced appetite, and I'm working with them on, you know, behavior change and the psychology of cravings and appetite and all that. So this ends up being the sustainable diet, whereas just generic calorie restriction ends up being, it doesn't have all the same benefits of being a sustainable way of eating or living. So yeah, it helps. Yeah. The keto diet helps people follow their budget. Yep. Yeah, I love that. So as a dietitian, Denise, people probably wonder what you eat, right? So I'm curious, because I know when you went to school, I actually, right out of high school, I went to, I was going to be a dietitian. And I got to my first nutrition class, and this would have been back in like 1990, 91. And they were teaching the 4 food groups, right? That was what nutrition was. So you had, you know, iceberg lettuce on Wonder Bread with Velveeta cheese and Spam. That was a healthy meal, right? So I was just like, and you know, I'd done my own studying before that and I was really on the train of like, you know, we needed whole foods to get vitamins and minerals. And when things are really processed, they're missing a lot of stuff. And so I just got to that first class and I'm like, what? This doesn't make any sense. I can't believe we're so behind the times here. So I just, you know, and then other stuff in life happened. I never, you know, completed that, just dropped out of school, started my other life. Right. So how, going through all the training you have and your experience with the keto diet, I'm really curious, like, how has that influenced what you eat and what works for you?
That's a good question. So what's been interesting is when I first started keto, it was just, you know, this is what you do for your patients. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you put your patients on this and they're going to eat low carb and et cetera, et cetera. It never really occurred to me, that I should eat lower carb. And then just over time, you just started thinking, maybe I, shouldn't eat. So, and we're talking, quite a few years ago when it really wasn't, keto wasn't really cool yet, right? Also, when you're eating low carb, they think, what's wrong with you? And also there was, going back, Atkins diet had, as a dietitian, I saw a lot of people that came in that had done a lot of weight fluctuation with the Atkins diet. So I didn't have a very good opinion at that point, because a lot of people lost a lot of weight and then regained more weight. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that had happened, not necessarily everybody. I'm seeing the ones that were unsuccessful. So at the same time, what I was doing for them wasn't working either. Okay, for weight loss, just typical calorie restriction, wasn't very successful either. Anyway, so the influence on me just continued to realize, I as a dietitian, you don't have to be a dietitian to know you really shouldn't eat a ton of sweets, but we have this attitude of, oh, anybody can have whatever they want and we'll all be happy in the end, but it's really not that way. So it definitely has influenced me to continue to cut back, and I have kind of two sets of kids, ages, and I always, I wanted my kids not to have eating disorders and eating issues and food complexes because mom's a dietitian. So I tried to be more loose and maybe not even, maybe allow more things than I would have, because I didn't want to create at a really young age. I want to provide a healthy diet, but not have them have all kinds of food craziness. So, but the farther I've come along, so the older two are out of the house. The younger two, it's more like, sorry guys, you don't need all that sugar, and then we're cutting it back, and it's not coming in. And it's a struggle, to keep sugar out of my house, just like it is for everybody else. And if anything, I feel like a very human dietitian. If that, to be transparent, always, trying to stay at a healthy weight's always been something that I've had to work hard for. It's not something that I don't trust skinny dietitians. Sorry, all you guys. But I just feel like if it's, if you've been through the struggle, maybe you can help people better. I mean, just like exactly like what you're doing. You've been there, done that, wrote the book, made the video, and you get it. So anyway, so just, again, to keep answering. So I just continue to cut more carbs out of my diet as the years have gone by, so I don't have an exact, I've had times where I may feel like right now, honestly, I have some inflammation, I have tendinitis, and I'm trying to get my ketones as high as I can right now to hopefully help that inflammation. Okay, came from trying to get ready for a triathlon, and so anyway, but other times, again, I like Beth Zubakini, I think she calls herself a flexitarian. Don't tie me down into this exact ratio, but definitely low carb is definitely, my lifestyle, my, where I've moved to. But, if you catch me with a potato, don't fry me, right? So, but I also say, I don't have epilepsy, thank God, or cancer, or some of these other conditions that would warrant the diet, on a strict level. Does that help?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And, that's my position, is that we all should have this metabolic flexibility that, a lower carb diet for most people is very healthy, and occasionally having some carbs, and our body should be able to digest those and process those and not, spiral out of control. And some of us are farther away from that. And because of generations of, maybe, diabetes and things like that, we may have a harder time, where we may need to do something more extreme longer term. But, somebody like you that's been active and fairly healthy your whole life, you're going to have a lot more flexibility there. So we're all different.
Yeah. And I think that's super important too, is, again, not putting everybody in a box, and we were created, God created us to run on carbs and on fat. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's important to look at especially when people are doing the diet for different reasons beyond a therapeutic implication, to think about that I've had patients ketotic for, well over 10 years, never out of ketosis. So I know that can be perfectly safe if monitored. Okay. At the same time, if you don't have a medical reason for that, then I think that's a discussion of, do you need to be 100% there? And there are a lot of different camps on, going in and out and how often, et cetera, et cetera. but I think there's definitely a place for that, for some flexibility.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I have one closing question, but before I ask that, was there anything else that you were hoping I would ask about or that you wanted to share with our viewers, listeners?
Wow. I guess just, again, we kind of touched on this at the front end, is just as you're looking for someone to work with, to really consider, people that are credentialed and people that have some experience. And if you're looking for a, therapeutic application, to choose wisely. The Charlie Foundation has been around forever and ever. They have some great educational information on the ketogenic diet. That Matthew's Friends is another. Charlie Foundation's initial focus was epilepsy, but they've gone from there to the other applications for the diet. So, and on there is a list of providers that can help. And there's also a list of centers. If you were looking for, epilepsy specifically, there's a list of centers in there where you could find one nearby if that was your desire.
Excellent. Okay, so my final question for you, Denise. The meteor's coming at us today. We're all going to be wiped out of this planet. What's your final meal?
Oh, I don't want to answer that. The meteor's coming, really? Yeah.
It's your final day. Come on, let's hear it.
My last day. Wow. I don't know. Probably a deep dish pizza. I don't know. No, I have to think about that. My grandmother-in-law's fried chicken.
Oh, wow, nice.
No, I hadn't really thought about what my last meal would be ever, but we'll all have a last meal someday. But if you have the wrong last meal too many times, you shouldn't have,
Yeah.
You better
only have the last meal when you know for sure. Like, oops, yeah. The meteor missed us. Oh, okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So I could say fat moms, but no, probably not.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I had one more question. I lied. I wanted to ask really quickly. I've totally ruined my format here, but I wanted to also ask about your position on exogenous ketones.
Wow. That also a good question. So one, I don't feel like there's enough research yet to have, a huge impact. I definitely have patients that are using that, and what I have them do is report back to me their results. Mm-hmm. I don't like that a lot of them have, I was trialing some this morning, and I'm like, wow, it's got, 3 grams of carb in with the ketones. And as someone who's always focused so much on the carbs, like, how can there be 3 grams of carb in there and that be okay? So, but they're going to take, your ketone levels up, to a certain extent. I have a lot of people, or I'll say a lot, definitely some patients that say, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. I have so much more energy, so there's that. Some of them have a whole lot of caffeine infused. And so I don't know if they have a lot more energy because, they have a lot of caffeine, and it's just like they just took a Vivarin or, had a big cup of coffee. So to me, the jury's out, but I think, I think it's really interesting, and there's probably a place, I'm not exactly sure where it is. And I'd be cautious about, when it's for some of these therapeutic applications, if people are using them, I really, I would want you to let your healthcare provider know, let your doctor and your dietitian know, I'm using these, how often am I using these, and what impact is it having? Because we really just truly don't know all that information yet. Again, so I'm kind of, jury's out. I've kind of played with them a little bit myself just to kind of see what I think. But I'm not, I wish I had a better opinion, but I'm kind of hanging out and seeing what happens with them.
Yeah, I love that very fair and balanced position. And a lot of people don't understand that in this country, anything labeled as a supplement does not have to be safety tested. It doesn't have to be any clinical trials. Anybody can put anything out there and just start selling it. So we really don't know, and especially the different combinations of what's out there. We don't know.
Right. And I'll say the ones that I tried this morning, I'm not going to say the brand, but it said no artificial sweeteners, and erythritol was the flavoring, and I think it has sorbitol too. And yet on the label it said no artificial sweeteners. I thought, okay. I have the packet sitting out because I'm going to call the company and ask them about their labeling, because I thought this is, it's not truth in labeling, or somehow they got around it. So yeah, It's just interesting. Yeah, there are very few restrictions on what people do, and the cost is very high. I feel like for the price point, it's pretty high for those. So if I'm going to recommend those, I want to know they work really well and do exactly what they say, and they're not harmful, because I won't incur that kind of a cost on a patient without really good reason.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other behind the scenes thing is there's no requirement for testing to prove that the label matches what's actually in the supplement as well. So make sure if you're any supplements people, you're buying them from very reputable companies that have done third-party assurance testing and all that stuff. But that's a whole other topic. So, all right, I think to wrap this up, this has been a fantastic, Denise. Where can people find you? Where can they find you?
Wow,
I said that like 3 times now. How can they find you?
Yeah, oh, wow. So you can find me, one, on the Charlie Foundation list under the resource page for Find a Provider. My website is Ketogenic Diet, and then my email, I think you'll probably attach to your show notes. So yeah, so going to my website is the best way. I have a contact form on my website, and yeah, I'd love to work with people. And I'll talk to people for sometimes just a brief time. Sometimes I just need a brief interview with them before they want to commit to something. But I'm pretty flexible, but I love to work with people on an individual basis. And I also have some class group things upcoming to start the first of the year that I'm kind of excited about, to try and hit more of these populations that really therapeutically need the diet, but it's not so available, and we need to get more going. So that's up and coming first of the year.
Oh, excellent. All right. So yeah, we'll put your contact info below. Hey, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and also a little tricky thing now on the YouTubes is hit subscribe. But if you actually want to get a notification when I've got new episodes coming out, hit the little notification. So it's like a little bell thing there. Click on that, and that will actually give you notifications for every one of the new episodes we have coming out. So lots of great interviews still to come. Thank you so much, Denise, for being here and sharing all that you're doing in the world. Such great work. So
yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.